on this computer. Hello, everybody. This is another episode of Artificial Intelligence and Cybersurgery. This is Dr. Andrew Gumbs. I'm the editor-in-chief of a journal called Artificial Intelligence Surgery, and I'm so happy to have our next guest, but I will let Dr. Vincent Grasso, my co-host, introduce him. I just want to point out that our journal is the first journal dedicated exclusively to artificial intelligence and surgery. Take it away, Vincent.
Sure, thanks. Hi, Dr. Vincent Grasso, and thanks, Andrew. It's a great pleasure and privilege to have Dr. Stephen Kavic on today for our podcast. He's a professor of surgery at the University of Maryland. He has a long history of working with Andrew, and they went to medical school together, I believe, at Yale, and did residency and fun stuff there. And please let us know what you're doing in the University of Maryland, and happy to talk about some AI activities perhaps with you.
So we were actually just catching up, and I was just telling Vincent how Steve and I, we went to medical school and then residency, and when we left off before I started recording, is I went off to Italy to do my pancreatic surgery fellowship, and then you were still, Vincent, you were there with Chang Soo Kim, who became a plastic surgeon, I believe.
Yes, he's a plastic surgeon in New Jersey. He married one of our radiology residents, and the two of them have a couple of kids. I actually took my daughter to a Sesame Street themed amusement park called Sesame Place outside of Philly, and we ran into them randomly and were able to catch up. So that was
was that with Eclair?
Yeah, that's right. My daughter's Emily Claire. Sometimes we call her Eclair.
Right, which now that I live in Paris is even more funny, right? So you call her Lightning.
We had some good times at the apartment and some bad times. The place was called the Four Beaches, not to give it a plug, but their pipes were in the garage and were exposed and uninsulated. And as you'll recall, they would freeze in the winter, which would leave us without hot water, and in one occasion caused a backup that enabled the apartment above us to put their dirty water into our showers and tubs. That was quite charming.
Oh God! And I was in Italy doing my pancreatic surgery fellowship, thankfully, and I don't recall this episode at all. Thanks for cleaning that up.
And we were okay. We were okay.
That's wild. And after you finished residency, you went to Maryland to do a fellowship, right?
Yeah, so I went from directly into fellowship. Fellowship was a 2-year fellowship in minimally invasive surgery at University of Maryland. Maryland is the home of fellowship. It started the first MIS fellowship in the world. Wow. There is a group in France that graduated someone a little earlier, so they rightly claim to have the first graduate. However, we're certainly the first in the Western Hemisphere. So I figured that any place that had been doing it a long time probably had worked out the kinks and knew how to do it right.
I think France still counts as the Western Hemisphere. No, you mean North America?
North America, sure. North America.
Now remind me
in the Americas.
Who were your fellowship directors back then? Who were?
So my main director was a guy named Adrian Park, and Adrian Park, a very big name, pioneer in laparoscopy. One of the impish delights that I had with him is that he did the first laparoscopic splenectomy in the world, along with his mentor, Michel Gagne. And the two of them did the first lap spleen and then wrote it up and submitted the manuscript. Meanwhile, en France, Delattre and Magnen did a lap spleen based on what they heard about from Park and Gagne.
Oh, no.
Their publication came out first. So all three publications say Delattre and Magnen did the first lap spleen. And if you ever meet Adrian Park and want to get his goat, just ask him, hey, I heard about Delattre and Magnen, the guys that did the first lap spleen, and you can just watch his ears turn red instantly.
Oh, that's funny because he's actually going to be on the podcast, I believe, in June. So
it's a charming story that he never gets tired of.
So Vincent, we're gonna have to ask him about that.
But Maryland came up with the Maryland dissector in 1991, that laparoscopic instrument developed by a guy named Carl Zucker, who was our chief of general surgery. And Zucker, they said, well, we'll name it the Zucker. And he's like, no, it'll be the Maryland. So he
Nice.
made himself a Maryland hero by doing that, right?
Wow.
But
Yeah.
if it had been me, it'd be the Kavic dissector. I mean,
Oh, big time. Oh, big time. That's great. I actually love that dissector, and I love it particularly because I do not have it here in my current hospital, and it is
Really?
a pain in the you know what to operate laparoscopically without a 5 mm Maryland. I will leave it at that. Uh, so after your 2-year fellowship, of which you did, I imagine, quite a bit of research also.
Yes, so I stayed here for fellowship, and then in October or so of my second year, the boss, Dr. Park, called me into his office and he said, well, young man, how do you think fellowship is going? And I was like, well, up to now, I thought pretty well. I thought I was getting the boot. And he
Yeah,
said, no, no, we really like you, would like you to stay. So
yeah.
I'm happy to say that I'm still in my first job, almost
Oh,
20
that's
years later now.
that is impressive. And
I
Adrian,
never left.
he ended up leaving Maryland about how long ago? Well,
2011,
leaving the
2012.
university. Yeah.
He went up to Nova Scotia briefly and then became the head of a hospital locally in Annapolis called Anne Arundel, which then expanded to Anne Arundel Health System and now goes by the name of Luminous Health. So he has been the surgeon in chief for Luminous Health up and through April. And now he has announced that he is leaving, but I don't actually know what he's doing or where he's going from here.
Oh,
So
interesting.
TBD.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll be able to tell you by the time of his podcast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully so. Hopefully so. Yeah. So, and you also married someone that was in my class of medical school.
That's right. Jennifer Eris,
Yeah.
who went on to do internal medicine at Yale New Haven Hospital, followed by nephrology.
Yeah.
And so she has been a private practice nephrologist here in Baltimore.
Right.
And yes, we've had a great time together.
That's great. That's great. Obviously, send her my regards, obviously. Um, so Adrian is still in Baltimore then.
In Annapolis, it's maybe
Oh,
15, 20 minutes away, but yes, he's very close.
okay. And it's part of the Johns Hopkins system.
It's an affiliate of it, but it's its own separate healthcare system.
Oh,
So, but it's I don't actually know, maybe 3 or 4 hospitals. It's not a very big system.
and now what is your what have you focused on as far as clinically? And then we'll
So
get to your research after that.
sure, sure. So my main role has been with the residency program. I'm the program director for the surgery residency, and that's sort of the dominant focus. So in terms of
I cannot imagine on planet Earth a better residency director. Just so you know, they're so lucky. I would almost go back to residency to be one of your residents, Steve. That must be that's great.
Well, it really has been a joy, and it's what I want to do. So it's been very good. So we've been able to build the program, to do a lot of things to make it better. We started a book program, and what we did is basically I came up with a list of the things that I wish I had read at each PGY level. This
Yeah.
is what I should have read as an intern. This is what I should have done as a second year. And we put that together, then went to the alums and said, hey, listen, this is something we really would like to do. How about paying for it? And
Yeah.
so we got our alums to donate, and now we have a book program where you get level specific books. First year, like Sabison Textbook of Surgery. The second year, Marino's ICU book. The third year is Essential Operative Techniques by Scott Connor, like an atlas, etc. So we've been able to sort of follow a map, a well-designed pathway to say, listen, all you got to do is follow the path, and you're going to pass your written boards on the first try.
As opposed to just looking at an entire library of books that's just overwhelming. It's like, do this and you'll do fine. It's great.
John Seashore was the program director, and I asked him how to prepare for our in-training exam, the ABSITE, and he said, do you want me to show you where the library is? And I said, thank you, Dr. Seashore. I will never ask again. And he was right. I mean, the answer was to read, but we try to be a little bit more sophisticated. So I'm sorry. To answer your question, clinically, I do minimally invasive surgery. I am a general surgeon, And my role as a program director, I have to teach interns. So I do open inguinal hernias and open umbilical, as well as laparoscopic ventral and inguinal and all the other stuff. One of the things that I've enjoyed doing the most is inflammatory bowel disease. So I've done a fair bit of surgery for Crohn's disease, and partnered with a couple of different groups with our plastic surgeons. We do abdominal wall reconstruction, some kind of big whack open surgery. And with our neurosurgeons, there is a fair bit of hydrocephalus. And hydrocephalus is drained by putting a tube into the head. I don't know that part, but then making it into a ventriculoperitoneal shunt. Right. So we shunt the patient, and I got called to their OR about 15 years ago. And they said, we've made an open incision, a mini laparotomy. All we see is fat. Do you have any idea where the peritoneum is? And I was like, no, I don't. But, we could always stick a scope in and do this better. Yeah. So I started to do laparoscopic VP shunt placements, and have been doing that to tune of maybe 60 or 70 a year. And when we do these shunts, it's very interesting because the previous paradigm was to have the most junior neurosurgery resident make a laparotomy incision, find the peritoneum, put in a purse string suture, pass the catheter in, and guess. And so there was a rate of wound infection that was maybe 2%, a rate of misplacement that was 2 or 3%. It didn't work all the time. And but we do it laparoscopically. We put the tube into the peritoneum with 100% certainty, and we watch it drip. Yeah. So, okay, great. So laparoscopy is cool. I don't need to tell this audience that. But the interesting part is that I do these with interns, because the name of the game is access. When we're doing a right hemicolectomy, let's hurry up and get the ports in so we can get to the meat of the case. But here, the meat of the case is access. Yeah. So I wrote this up. I did 111 cases, consecutive cases with an intern with no complications. So we brought the complication rate from around 7% down to 0. And it was a unique instance where it was a benefit to patient safety and resident education. We improved care and taught people at the same time. So that was really a great little project.
Well, I mean, that is a hugely important project. I'm interested in autonomous actions in surgery, and that's one of the things I'm interested in, is actually how to do autonomous, or at least intelligent access, to do it safely, because that's step one of the procedure, right? So
sure. And unfortunately, we're still on the level of this is an art, right? You take your needle and you click it just so, and you feel it and you wiggle it, and all that is true and it works, but it probably could be automated with cross-sectional imaging into more precise depth.
I'm gonna have to connect you with these group of researchers I work with in Germany. They have a way to kind of create intelligence during the Varus needle. I don't know if you use the Varus needle.
I use it all the time.
Okay, so actually, you might be ideal to start to work on their project, maybe in the United States. So I'll try to put you two guys together. Sure. I'll explain it a little bit later, because I obviously can't get into it too much on a podcast that we're going to put onto YouTube. But that could be interesting. Definitely.
Well, some non-proprietary stuff then. So one of the things that I do every fall is review applications. So we have 6 categorical spots for residency. This past year, we had 2,008 applications. So it's a lot of time. And so I'm looking for ways to, how can I automate this process? How can I leverage technology? And honestly, I was looking through applications a couple of years ago, and I was thinking about sex. No, hold on. I was thinking about gender and how people write things. And I looked at about 50 applications from girls versus 50 from boys. And it was a striking difference. The female applicants used we, us, team. The male applicants used I, me, mine. It was dramatic, their use of pronouns. And I was like, wow, there's really a difference between men and women in the way that we use pronouns. And I'm going to take a look at all of the applications. So I went through 1,500 applications, and slowly over time, regression to the mean, there was no difference whatsoever. And I will confess, I wept openly after, counting pronouns and 1,500 personal statements.
Oh, no.
But then I got a book by James Pennebaker called The Secret Life of Pronouns. And it turns out that men and women in normal conversation use pronouns very differently. And so the fact that there was no difference was actually striking in our personal statements. So I was like, I got to meet this guy, James Pennebaker. He seems to know a lot. And he started a company in Toronto using natural language processing or artificial intelligence to do linguistic analysis. And he said, there's more to this than just pronouns. We can pick out personality traits. And I said, that's amazing. So we started to use natural language processing to churn through personal statements. And the answer is, we did it wrong. We did it absolutely wrong. I said, hey, I'll just feed the personal statements into the computer and then they will give me a rank list. I don't even have to interview anyone. Yeah. I don't have to look. What could be easier? It doesn't work that way. Yeah. The way that it does work is you say, I'm looking for people who are perhaps not neurotic, people who have a great degree of patience. How does this come across in their personal statements? And when you try to tell the computer to pick out traits, it does that very well. So my thought again, to do it wrong, was why don't I take a look at the residents we've got and just say, find more people like this. But Amazon did this experiment. They had people write a personal statement to apply for Amazon. And then they said, here are good employees, go find more like that. And it completely eliminated diversity because they were self-selecting for the same person. And that was bad for the company. And it was a bad way to hire people. So I was like, all right, that's a bad way to do it. So we found some striking differences between general surgery residents and the normal population. We have a very high degree of confidence. We have a very low degree of embarrassment. And so in the operating theater, we're okay with that. We're on display. We're going to make errors, and that doesn't really trouble us. So we were able to come up with a lot of things that had pretty good face validity that said, yeah, that makes sense. This is the profile for a surgery resident. This is some of the research that we've been doing, and we got pretty far along. And then they say that COVID ruins everything. And one of the things was virtual interviewing. And so they changed the process and said that people could make individual personal statements for every program that they applied to. And so now it's very different when you send out a personal statement to just one program versus where you send one personal statement to 50 different programs. So the personality analysis is a lot more finicky because they're trying to tell you what you want to hear. I've seen from your website that you are known for MIS and trauma. I am interested in MIS and trauma.
Right.
There's different linguistic bells, but it's also a directed personal statement, which has thwarted some of our efforts to apply it indiscriminately.
So are you able to use some of the information as a guide, like to weed out certain people, or not even?
Yes, we certainly can do that. So it is very good at sorting out people, for instance, that don't want to do any research. So ours is a university-based program that has 2 years of required research. So it is a 7-year process. If someone says, I would like to graduate in 5 years and fix hernias in my hometown, God bless. We need more surgeons like you, but we're the wrong program for you. If you want to go into rural medicine and practice in an environment which is low resources, that's not what we do. We are very high resource utilization urban medical center. So we have been able to use it in some screening capacities. Which has cut down on my need to go to Lens Crafters every October after reading all the applications.
Right. So well, that's very interesting. I would I'm trying to figure out how you can write something for our journal on exactly this. Have you published on this?
Yeah, in artificial intelligence surgery. Yeah, so we do have one article on natural language processing and how we were able to use it in the residency process. We were the first residency program of any type to use NLP technologies in our application process. So we've presented at the American College of Surgeons, Association of Surgical Education, Academic Surgical Congress. and a bunch of other places because it's new, it's novel, and again, we're pretty open with our failures and say this is how we misused the technology and how we can do better.
Now, well, Vincent, you're an expert on natural language processing. I'm going to ask you now. This is all interesting and helpful for Stephen, but I can't help but ask this question: how do you make something like this economically viable? It seems like it's a wonderful idea and it's helpful, but it doesn't seem like it'll pay for itself anytime soon. Not that that's what Stephen's goal is, but I'm wondering if you can think of a way that something like this could actually eventually even pay for itself to get more and more refined and become even more useful.
Well, I mean, NLP has a very deep role in medical informatics on the research side, on the business side. Those of us that have been doing NLP for a long time have been waiting for the right time in the market so that you could actually get out of the laboratory with it and into the commercial sector. I think what we heard, which I'm very happy you were very frank about, was that there's a general misconception that using an application that has behind the scenes a lot of NLP is always going to give you the right answer, because how could it give you the wrong answer, right? So the public trusts things like ChatGPT and everything else to give them the correct answer. But at the end of the day, you're only as good as the language model and how you train the machine. So if you don't train the machine correctly, you don't get the answers that you really should be getting. I'm just going to refer you to a nice little book here. It's called The Trivium. I'll send this to you.
It's not quite in focus there.
You're on Blur. You're on Blur.
Okay. I'll send it off to you. Those of us that did liberal arts in college, that studied logic and grammar and rhetoric, the Trivium, recognize that the foundations of NLP is in fact computational linguistics, rhetorical understandings, grammar, and that's what allows you to ingest prose and make sense of it, whether it's going to be a sentiment index, the rhetorical value of the document, other things that give insights into the construct. So residents that are trying to game the system, or people that try to write something that they think you want to know and believe, they can use these tools. But at the end of the day, the NLP environment is profound. And so from a commercial perspective, I had built 20 years ago, I was using NLP to dissect my surgical dictations, my operative reports, and extract value from those reports and do coding from it. So when I said I saw a patient in the emergency room, or I performed a laparoscopic appendectomy with the chief complaint of abdominal pain, chief complaint and abdominal pain is an ICD-9 code. The place of service emergency room is a code that you need for billing. So you can rip through these documents and do a lot of the heavy lifting. That's where the commercial value comes in for a lot of this, right? Or ripping through 10,000 echocardiogram reports, and what was the incidence of mild mitral valve prolapse or severe aortic stenosis? How do you go rip through all those things? That's a form of NLP, right? You would go through that and look for those phrases, etc. So there's massive commercial value. It's all in how these tools get used, what business application they're placed into, and frankly, how do you validate that what comes out of the engine is accurate, so that you can actually use it without having humans check everything, right? So it's a very interesting space. I applaud that you've gone down that path, and you're very early. I mean, that's really wonderful. What I didn't know that until you just said that. So that's amazing.
About 10 years ago, there was a woman who applied to our program, and she said she didn't come to medical school to be a surgeon. She strategically took her surgery rotation in November, so she would get credit for 4 weeks, but only really have to do 3 weeks because of Thanksgiving here in the States. So she does her 3 weeks, but she enjoys it, to her surprise. And then on Thanksgiving week, the residents say to her, "You don't need to stick around. You can go home, whatever." And she's like, "No, I'm interested in surgery. I want to see this case." So she scrubs in, and she's thinking to herself, at the other end of this is the train ride home and Thanksgiving dinner, which is turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy. And I love gravy. So I must love surgery more than I love gravy,
Gravy.
which again is a lot. And I thought anyone that professes their love of gravy twice in one paragraph is somebody I want to meet. So I invite her for an interview, right? And so I'm so excited to meet this gravy candidate. And so she comes into my office and I'm like, so what's your favorite type of gravy? And she looks at me and says, brown, I guess. And I said, I'm sorry, do you know why I'm asking you about gravy? And she said, no. And I said, it's in your personal statement about how much you love gravy. That's why you're
Yeah.
here. I found it charming.
Yeah.
She said, oh, my personal statement. I had some help with that. So the fact that people have been getting help in their personal
Absolutely.
statements is not new. We know this is a collaborative
Sure.
and group effort. And whether it is her best friend who secretly loved gravy, or whether it was Chat GPT, which is saying what we want to hear,
Yeah.
we already are in an environment where we are having to deal with what is truth and what is original.
Wow, that's a disturbing and it's a disturbing story. It's but that's the world I guess we live in now.
And I'm not a gravy enthusiast, but for the purposes of an essay, I wish I could be. It was
Yeah,
it was
no,
a
of
great
course,
essay.
it's a great story. I was hoping to find out like
Yeah, new recipe.
how
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
doing.
you
No,
learn
no,
stuff.
what a great surgeon she became and everything, but I won't ask. It's okay. So, how long have you been interested in natural language processing? Would you
I
say?
guess maybe around 2015 is when I first kind of
Wow.
became aware of it and started to look into it and really started to apply it probably 17, 18. And then we've been using it every year since. We've tried a couple of different things like letters of recommendation. One of the thoughts is that we all kind of use code words. There's the very good and the excellent and the outstanding, and
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
sort of maybe roughly correlates to C, D, and A.
Right,
So, what if we had the ability of the computer to say, don't even bother to read the letter. You can just, this is an A letter or an A plus letter.
right.
Maybe again, that makes my life easier as a manual reviewer of holistic applications. And it's been very difficult to do that. People come from different backgrounds, different English
Different
proficiency.
cultures are much more tight with their praise.
And someone wrote in a letter of recommendation, my only wish is that I had a child of marriable age. That's how much I'm in love with this candidate. And it was a weird thing to say, but it was the highest possible praise that person could have given, but it would have escaped the detection because it
Right.
wasn't quite built up for the excellent versus outstanding model that we were trying to engineer. So we've had a lot. It's actually very good if you have someone that writes the chair, say 10 letters of recommendation a year. And so you can get a backlog of 100 letters and then say, okay, when this chair writes a letter, is this a great letter or a good letter or a
Yeah.
mediocre letter? We can do that. We can sort of standardize it when we have enough data. So program directors and chairs write a lot of letters of recommendation and we have some fodder. But for an average applicant, they get some junior trauma surgeon who wrote one letter this year, and that's really not interpretable as much as we would like. So again, we've run into some walls and said, well, this is not where the technology is bad. It's just we don't have enough of a database to give it the good stuff to come in, and we're left with garbage out. So
Sure.
it's been a voyage of discovery.
And the data that you're getting is from an electronic application. So you have all of the data. It's not like you have to use an image of a pre-printed application.
Well, actually, a lot of people upload letters of recommendation as PDFs,
Oh,
which are
right,
a lot harder than when we
right,
have things in Word. So a personal statement can be converted to Word, and that can be very straightforward, but letters are often PDFs, which are just harder to do. Even most of the converters, the PDF to Word, basically take a screenshot and then put the picture into a Word file. That doesn't
right.
really help. So,
Yeah.
yes, there are optical scanners and you can get around it, but that increases the cost and the time and the effort. And again, when you're dealing with individual letters without a lot of a long track record, its utility is really pretty questionable at this point.
Well, it reminds me, I got invited to do a presentation at the American Hospital of Paris on something to do with racism, and I wanted to talk about healthcare, potential for racism in healthcare, and I wanted to focus on artificial intelligence. And ultimately, I'm going to turn the presentation into an editorial or something, and I'm going to ask you to be one of my co-authors because I want to.
Sure.
I love this that you noticed right away that the NLP affected the diversity, because I think AI has the potential to fix this, but unfortunately, in the current form, AI has the potential to, as we know, vastly exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, so we've known that there are some metrics that are kind of fake news for a long time, right? USMLE step 1. Well, people that score higher on that test, generally speaking, do better on tests. Okay,
Right.
fine, fair enough. But the
Yeah.
person that scores a 280 or a 290, they've never been outside, right? They've
Yeah.
never been on a date, right?
Right.
Maybe
Right.
that's not the optimal personality that we want. The extremes of the test are bad, low and high. And we
Right.
want sort of that bell curve in the middle. So we kind of know that maybe it's not just higher is better. Higher is better from a threshold to a threshold is the opinion of many. So now that test is pass fail, fine. But many
Really?
metrics,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, step 1 is pass fail, step 2 is not. And so now the game is that everybody takes step 2 early to give you some numeric value. But
Okay.
even so, we know that a lot of things that seem objective require interpretation. And so the person that went to one school or came from a very privileged background, the scores may be differently interpreted than for someone that came to the United States as an immigrant. Right. I mean, there's definite room for human interpretation and evening out what appears to be a one standard.
I cannot believe the numbers. You said 2,000 for 6 spots. That is
2008. And so that's basically an auditorium full of people, right? Over 350 people for each one job we have to offer. So
wow.
programs have to split a lot of hairs, and the virtual process has made this worse because you don't interview on site, you interview virtually, which means that all of your costs are just application costs. Which enables you to interview or to apply to dozens of programs. Last year, the average student in surgery applied to 60 programs.
Oh my
But
God.
it makes a tremendous burden on the program to try to tease out, are you just applying because it was pretty
Because you
easy
can.
to do,
Yeah.
or because you actually want to be doing a 7-year program in Baltimore, Maryland? And so it's a huge degree of inaccuracy where I know I'm making the wrong judgment calls about a lot of applicants. I'm saying this person from Nevada is never coming here. Maybe it's their dream, or that this person from across town is definitely interested in staying here and they just desperately want to go away.
I looked, I follow the Yale Surgical Program on Instagram or LinkedIn. I can't remember which. I think Instagram. And I was not shocked, but I think there were literally 6 women and 1 African American male. I was shocked, pleasantly shocked. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, our program is about 60% categorical female. So
Yeah.
we have more women than men, and we pay attention to our metrics. But in terms of things with 6 residents a year, it's never going to be a perfect reflection of American society. So we want to celebrate diversity. We want to be very inclusive.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we have people of all gender orientations and that everyone feels welcome. But you can pick any number and say, well, your Asian female component is light, or your Hispanic male
Yeah.
overrepresented, and okay, yes, that's the way it may be this year or next year, but we're trying, and we do pay attention to these things.
I read an article before I moved back to Europe that said that women and minorities were going into surgery more, not necessarily for the reasons that we would think of more inclusion and positive reasons, but by the fact that reimbursement had gotten down, that let's just say other genders and races were no longer going into surgery. Have you seen that? Um, more women and minorities going into surgery and the other specialties, or in medical school in general, or is that too an oversimplification?
I don't know about every medical school. I haven't seen those numbers, but in University of Maryland School of Medicine for the last 3 years, we've had more female applicants than male in surgery. That's been a consistent trend. And so, yes, applications used to be maybe circa 2000, 65 to 70% male, and now it's about 55% male. So definitely more in that direction. But yeah, the reasons are unclear. And so there's a lot of room for speculation.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, this is clearly our longest podcast, because I can talk to you for forever. I'm going to have to let you go. But Vincent, I'm going to let you close this out. But then I'll stop the record button and we'll talk a few more minutes, if that's all right with you. Okay. So Vincent, after you.
Sure. No, thank you for all that insight. We spoke, I think, today the most about NLP that we have in the past 26 podcasts.
Yeah.
Love to talk to you some more about that, because I think there's some research we're doing that we may be able to collaborate with you on, and maybe get some funding, which would be kind of fun to help do some things. So we're closing out our podcast. What number is this? 28, Andrew? 27?
This is actually 28. Yeah, this is the 28.
28.
Yeah.
And as Andrew said, this is the only we're the only surgical journal that's dedicated 100% to all things AI, and we'll have some more interesting guests soon. So thank you again for joining, and we'll see you all soon.